Hello, everyone. Just going to take a quick minute here before we get into our brand new episode. My name is Adam, one of the hosts of Talkin' Costner, and Cam and I are super pumped, excited, and we hope all the cost heads out there are too, to announce that we now have a Patreon. That's right. As you're listening to this, our Patreon is now live at patreon.com/Talkin' Costner. That's TALKINCOSTNER, Talkin' Costner. And we will be loading up a ton of bonus and exclusive content for everybody who can't get enough of our dulcet tones, maybe, but more likely Costner related talk. We are going to be talking multiverse Costner. That's right. We often talk about other movies that Kevin could have done or would have done or maybe was slated to do. We're going to look at those films and talk about them in the context of what would have been like for Kevin to be in this movie. We are also going to be talking Yellowstone. Yes, we're finally on the bandwagon, so saddle up on your horse. We will be talking Yellowstone there as well, episode by episode breakdowns as well on that Patreon. You're going to get early access to our main episodes and more. So check it out, Talkin' Costner Patreon. It is live now. Patreon.com/Talkin' Costner. Multiple tiers you can sign up for. We are super excited about this and so grateful for everybody who's listened over the past year as we jump into the next stage of the Costnerverse. Check it out.
I never realized Kennedy was so dangerous to the establishment. Is that why?
Well, that's a real question, isn't it? Why? The how and the who is just scenery for the public. Oswald, Ruby, Cuba, the mafia. Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question, why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up?
We're talking Costner, Tin Cup to Silverado, talking Costner, Bodyguard and Fandango, Robin Hood is making the rich pay, going off the board on draft day, talking Swingbo, Wyatt Earp and JFK.
Okay. Let me tell you, this is the movie I've been waiting for. I feel like this one's in my bones. I feel like I started a Kevin Costner podcast just so I could one day be able to do a JFK conspiracy theory podcast and have nobody think I'm crazy. You know?
Oh, if you want to talk conspiracies and have people support you, the podcast realm is the perfect place to do it. It couldn't be more timely for us to just throwing out wild accusations.
Yeah, that's true.
In the world today, and particularly in the podcast world, I think if this is going to be the point where we're going to have Bruce Springsteen leave Spotify over this podcast, and as much as I love him, we got to do what we got to do. So,
hey, if you're down on the bridges across the border because you don't trust your government, hey, do we have a podcast for you?
Oh, this will be the closest. This will be the closest we get to potentially picking up some Freedom Convoy listeners.
Yeah, and hey, there's some Castro conspiracy theories to go around. Just like is Justin his son? Who knows? Except I don't think they met for 5 years until Justin was like a 5-year-old.
But yeah, man, there's lots of people who have met their dad that long. Like, oh god,
don't let the facts hold you back, man.
Exactly. as Michael Rooker says in this movie, how do you know who your daddy is? Because your mama told you.
Oh, that's right.
Perfect segue. But I would be remiss if I didn't first introduce our guest for this month's episode. My boy Gabe Broderick. He is a podcaster. He's the co-host of the Concessions Stand, a weekly movie podcast breaking down film and film news every Monday. Gabe, welcome.
Boys, listen, let me tell you. There's a few things that I like more than just film and TV and the cinema. It's JFK conspiracies.
Yeah.
And right behind that is Kevin Costner. And to my surprise, when they made a movie where Kevin Costner about JFK conspiracies, it was a match made in heaven.
Intersection occurred. You knew.
Yeah.
You were
It's a movie.
destined.
Oh my gosh.
Me and Gabe met. We went to a local trivia night together. We were on a trivia team, and I think the first night I met you, I was talking about this movie, and you said, "What's your theory, the mob or the CIA?" And I said, "It's the same thing, baby."
And in that moment, I knew I met a brother.
Yeah. And then on another week of trivia, I felt like an idiot because there was other, one of the categories at trivia night is a movie category, and they play movie clips. And there'd been a couple where it was Kevin Costner movies, and I was like, "Ugh, out of here, Child's Play. I got this. I know that's Field of Dreams in my fucking sleep." And then there was one, and I was racking my brain, and it was a movie clip of a guy talking about, some black ops in Dallas, and Gabe,
It's the military-industrial complex.
you really put a knife to my heart when you're like, "That's Donald Sutherland. That's JFK." And I was like, God damn it. How did I not get that?
That is Mr. X.
Mr. X.
I like you too much to
Waylon
give you a
Smithers.
Yeah, we're talking JFK today. What a movie. So for those who don't know what JFK is about.
Ever heard those letters? Sheeple?
New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison discovers there's more to the Kennedy assassination than the official story. That's what IMDb says this movie's about, and I would say that's pretty succinct.
And back in the 60s, that was a real thing. Now, you go down the street, of course, but that was a big deal back in, almost 60 years ago.
Yeah.
That's wild.
You guys, every year we get edge closer to 2048 when the real files get loose, and let me tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what's. I think that's
better than my birthday.
The movie, yeah, the movie, the event. It was all waiting for around this time, our epoch to really get in because. I'm sure all will come to light. Everything will be revealed and wrapped up in a neat little package in a few years. So, we're one of the we're one of the last on the frontier here to still be able to do some light speculation about a very clear-cut case.
Or be like Crash Davis and say, "I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone."
That's right.
Oh, the zag. I love a good zag.
We've got Kevin Costner in a movie like 3 years before this being like, "No, I don't believe any of that bullshit." Yeah, and there's a new documentary, Oliver Stone. He won't fucking let it go.
That's a man who he came back from Vietnam, and you want to hang up all your stress and your issues on something, and he's like, "I'm not going to take up woodworking. I'm going to take up conspiracy theories about JFK." And I don't blame him.
I'm going to make about 9 movies about this.
I will say that there are a lot more depths to plumb than James Cameron going back to the Titanic every 5 years. So I'm Team Oliver Stone on let's just keep digging in here.
For sure.
Rather than I'm gonna do a doc on Nat Geo now on Titanic. I'm gonna do Avatar and tie some things in here. So I'm all about Oliver Stone going back to the well here. There's lots to.
What's your over under on Oliver Stone making it to 2048 when the official government document?
How old?
He's old now. But you know what? It's so crazy.
He?
We're 30 years away from this movie, right? Like,
yeah,
he's 75 now, so. He could make it. I mean, I don't know how. I don't know the man's health records. I'm sure the government does, but we don't. Yeah,
he'll get a suspicious form of cancer that kills him in a week.
I think Tommy Lee Jones will make it, but maybe not Oliver Stone.
Yeah, that's
Tommy Lee Jones.
Maybe
Surprisingly decent body of an older gentleman in this movie.
We'll get into it, as we often say on this podcast, but I couldn't agree more. I've never seen a man dipped in gold and gone, "Well done, sir."
Yeah.
He's not a young man in this movie.
The hilarity is I've seen this movie upteen times, and for some reason, upon this most recent viewing, I was like, "Wow, this guy's in really good shape. Good for him."
Yeah, that's true. He's doing some overhead presses for sure with those big shoulders. No doubt. No doubt. All right. In this movie, I'm just going to break down the key players. This movie has one of the most insane casts maybe to ever exist in a movie. Kevin Costner, Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Oldman, Jack Lemmon, Joe Pesci, Sissy Spacek, Ed Asner, Sally Kirkland, John Candy, Kevin Bacon, Walter Matthau, Donald Sutherland, Vincent D'Onofrio, Michael Rooker, Wayne Knight, Laurie Metcalf, Brian Doyle Murray, Thomas Millian, and I'm sure I'm missing it people. J.O. Saunders. Like, there's just so many people.
And Mr. Garrettson himself.
Yes, and Jim Garrison, the man himself, playing a judge.
Playing Earl Warren.
Yeah, the movie's got 8 Oscar winners in it and 2 nominated performers.
Did you mention Newman himself, Wayne Knight?
Wayne Knight, I sure did. You better believe I did.
Yeah, who plays New not Newman. But obviously some conspiracies going on with Seinfeld there.
That is one magic loogie.
We'll get into it when that magic.
We'll get into it.
The fact that somebody can be part of like such a historic scene and then also the direct parody of that scene, which is like maybe close to just as iconic as that scene, is like within the same year, like 2 years. Yeah. It's wicked.
That's Jordan level comedic acting.
For real. We got Oliver Stone directing. Oliver Stone, I'm just going to break down Oliver Stone's 86 to 99 because speaking of Jordan level, this is like a Jordan level run. I mean, there's the odd miss, but we've got Platoon, Wall Street, Talk Radio, Born on the 4th of July, The Doors, JFK, Heaven and Earth, never seen it, Natural Born Killers, insane movie, Nixon, U-Turn, Any Given Sunday.
Wow,
that's a run.
That's a run.
That's like and there's not really a miss in that. Like that's just an insane clip of like even at the bottom end, it's still like a lot of people at Blockbuster watch this.
Yeah, like even like a movie like U-Turn, which I don't think was a hit. Like I rented that on VHS. Money. Yeah.
And when you think about, I mean, hey, there's been, of course, epic runs of directors. And, I'm a huge, as a kid who grew up in the 90s and like Jurassic Park was one of my favorite movies. You look at like a Spielberg in this era. But let's talk about not just like, big Hollywood blockbusters, but movies that were designed to really like screw with the American psyche and be successful and make money at it. Like the list you just ran off of not just action or comedy or ones that are built on set pieces or just driven by star power. Certainly a lot of stars in them, but movies that are really designed, I think, especially in the 90s, in a much more tame time in a lot of ways, to push the envelope.
Yeah, I mean, Oliver Stone's a pretty anti-establishment film director in the most general sense. I mean, even if you look at Any Given Sunday, which at surface level is a football movie, but really it's an anti-organization football on how they treat players. I mean, it was concussion before concussion, which I think is really interesting.
It never feels like he made one for the studio just so he could make the next one. Just like, he kept on hitting. Like this movie...
Wait, he did not do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
He didn't do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
I'm shocked.
No Adam Sandler films, although I would love to see that.
I was expecting him to do at least one Air Buddy movie, but I'm shocked.
Yeah, that's right.
He teamed up with Robert Richardson as the DOP on this. This guy's also got an insane career. He did basically all of Stone's movie. He's done basically everything that Tarantino did since Kill Bill, did Casino, Aviator, Shutter Island. So he's just worked with like 3 of the biggest American filmmakers since 1980. It was edited by John Hutching and Pietro Scalia and composed by who better than John Williams?
Yeah.
The editing is an interesting point because, again, upon most recent viewing, I noticed that the editing is really interestingly paced. Like it is all over the place.
It is insane.
It is a heart attack on film. Like it is smooth and relaxing and family oriented when he's with his family, and immediately it's like you're having a panic attack and the frames are cutting in between each other and the music is crescendo. I'm like, wow, this is well done. This is a lot of mood building.
I'll just say I like this movie a fuck ton, and like
Barry in the lead here.
Barry in the lead, but you don't have to listen to the rest of the podcast. You know where I stand. No one cares where Adam stands. We all know this.
We don't get more monetization of the zero monetization we have by people getting to the end. So might as well just get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Get it out.
And like rewatching it, it's just like the goddamn gall. Really the insane undertaking to take all of this information, all of this footage, and then recreate some of it. Like basically he just shot the Lee Harvey Oswald story with Gary Oldman. Like, there's probably about an hour-long Gary Oldman story here.
Gary Oldman has his own movie that nobody really nobody else is in it. It's kind of just his own thing. It's shot differently. It has a different frame rate. Mm-hmm. Like, it's its own film. Same thing with, I think that's really interesting, the way it was built as a screenplay is even the Ed Asner and Jack Lemmon scene, like that little half part.
Oh yeah, the film noir that we have in the
movie by itself too, which I need to see. I need this to be an off-Broadway play, desperately.
I've got news for you about Jack Lemmon and Ed Asner starring in a film currently, but
maybe in heaven, baby, maybe in heaven.
I'm not here to yuck on your yum.
Give me the prequel. Let's recast.
All right.
Hey, Bryan Cranston. I've always thought Bryan Cranston is our Jack Lemmon. I truly believe that.
Okay, sure. Who's our Walter Matthau then?
Oh, that's a good question. I do not know.
I gotta say, they got the grumpy old men in this movie, and they don't even get to interact.
They don't even
That's a crime. That missed opportunity.
I love how you're like the grumpy old men and not the Odd Couple. The thing that the grumpy old men was treading on the popularity of.
Yeah, because I like the 90s. Hello. We're talking Costner.
We're done, Costner. This movie, filmed March to August 91. It was released December 19th, 1991. It had a budget of $40 million. Had an opening weekend of 5.2. Worldwide gross, 205.
So it got there. Slow start.
Not that. I mean, 5.2 is not bad for an opening weekend. We've seen worse. I remember Dances with Wolves was like 500,000, and then it grossed 420 or something.
Yeah, a different time, because a movie now, even adjusting for inflation, a movie now that would start at that rate but then finish where it was, like, that doesn't happen anymore at all. So it's, I mean, we talked a little bit about Dances with Wolves, but there was, you could have these long runs. It wasn't even necessary that you had less competition. There were still lots of movies. In fact, probably more movies being pumped out. But it had the time and the place to kind of get to where it was eventually going to be.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an established runway.
Yeah, you might say there wasn't a giant media conglomerate that just ate up all the screens like there is now.
I like superheroes. No. Don't talk shit.
I think there's still an opportunity for that, because that's what we saw with Parasite. I mean, granted, it's a different film altogether, and it's a foreign film, but I think there's an opportunity for when there's a little bit of word of mouth and there's a little bit of air in the tires that something can kind of really get going, You're
right. I won't just shit talk. I just won't shit talk Marvel just because I can, like I do every other podcast.
But I will say something I thought about going into this movie and looking at those stats. And I should say up front, okay, so we have Gabe. This is Gabe loves this movie, and so as tipped his hat does Cam. This was my virgin voyage on JFK.
Oh.
We talked about this maybe a few episodes ago.
Wow, jeez.
This was my first watching. Shit. I had never seen JFK. I'd never even heard of the man. No. This young...
I thought it was Junior Fried Chicken this whole time.
This young Catholic gentleman that rose to office. I thought about this kind of going in, the idea that, in when did Spielberg's Lincoln come out? 2013, 2012?
Something like that, yeah.
Spielberg had to fight to get Lincoln to be more than an HBO film.
Probably the most popular president.
Yeah.
Maybe George Washington beats him, but...
Teddy Roosevelt's not seeing any of that action?
Well, he was a knight in the museum.
And touche.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got Steven Spielberg taking the most famous popular American president of all time in a tried and true genre biopic, and he almost couldn't get it made. And so just me thinking about this, going, wow, could this movie get made today? And I'm not even saying in the format it was, but just even as a premise, would it make the light of a theater screen?
No chance, I don't think. And also, it's not about JFK. It's about a crazy guy named Jim Garrison that, like, up until this movie, everyone was like, that guy was a little crazy, right? Like, that guy was...
Which is kind of why I think this movie could still get made today. It's like if the Bourne Supremacy had no killing and all assassination. You kind of get this. You got to just get a magic conspiracies, and you're running around and you're pointing fingers at people. It's a good old whodunit. It's Law and Order New Orleans.
John Candy is like perfect for a Law and Order New
Oh,
Orleans.
daddy-o. Oh,
we're getting past it. We're going to talk a lot about John Candy in this movie. All right, award season. This one had some love. It won Best Cinematography and Best Editing. I got no beef on that.
Yep.
It was nominated for Best Picture, lost to Silence of the Lambs. No beef on that.
Fair
Noble
enough.
win.
Nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Tommy Lee Jones. He lost to Jack Palance in City Slickers. Would you believe it?
Jack Palance in City Slickers?
I like City Slickers, but wow, that's interesting.
That's pretty wild. Oliver Stone was nominated for Best Director. He lost to Jonathan Demme. Silence of the Lambs, no beef.
I'm sorry, just to go back here. Is that why Tommy Lee Jones wins the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for The Fugitive? They have to give him the gimme?
Is it a makeup?
Okay.
Yeah,
it feels a little bit. Oh, The Fugitive's a great film. That's beside the point.
I'm just looking who else was. So Harvey Keitel for Bugsy, Michael Lerner, Barton Fink, great, and Ben Kingsley for Bugsy. Bugsy was this big movie that year that I don't think anyone's talked about since 1990. Warren Beatty. I don't think anyone's talked about that movie since 1991. Like, I've literally never heard of it.
Warren Beatty's curse on Hollywood wore off in like 98.
Yeah. That's right. Oliver Stone was nominated, lost to Silence of the Lambs. Fair enough. Best Adapted Screenplay, again, lost Silence of the Lambs. Best Sound, it was nominated for, lost to T2 Judgment Day. No beef there.
That's a tough one.
And then Best Score, it was nominated for and lost to Beauty and the Beast. But Adam,
be my guest, Jim Garrison. Be my guest.
Everyone loves John Williams, but do you think Michael Kamen had a better score this year for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? Because I kind of do.
No doubt. I'm not just going with recency bias since we just obviously recorded that. And I'm a Star Wars guy. I'm a Jurassic Park guy. I love John Williams. As we talked a little bit about Robin Hood, this is the era of recycling themes and getting away with it. And I love, as this was my virgin voyage, listening particularly to the score at the end of this movie in the courtroom scene going, that's The Lost World. That's Jurassic Park 2 right there. I know exactly what that is. And so I have no beef with John Williams, and he does incredible work, but absolutely, if we talk about the test of time, the score from JFK is not remembered in the way that is particularly that Robin Hood iconic theme is. And I would say the whole score, as we talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't normally bring up the Golden Globes because nobody gives a shit, but I do think it was interesting that Oliver Stone won Best Director for that. Silence of the Lambs got shut out of the Golden Globes, which I didn't know. I know this isn't a Silence of the Lambs
they
podcast,
didn't but did they not do the Hollywood Foreign Press tour with them? Did they not buy them fancy gifts?
Apparently not.
Bugsy won Best Picture at the Golden Globes.
Wow.
And Kevin Costner was nominated for Best Actor, but you know who won? Not Anthony Hopkins. Nick Nolte for Prince of Tides. Now, I've never seen Prince of Tides, but
I thought you were about to say Point Break, so I'm. Oh wait, that was Gary Busey. I get them confused.
Yeah. All right, into the movie. We just have a great history of Kennedy's presidency, narrated by Martin Sheen. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah, which I was like, oh, so we'll see him again during this movie. Nope, he just does the narration.
Marty Sheen also really loves anything to do with Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's true.
He's like, I don't know if he's from Nantucket, but he gives me big Nantucket energy.
Even if he's getting thrown off a building in Boston, it's because he loves that state.
Oh yeah,
he exploded so quickly, poor guy.
Yeah, those ankles just shattered beneath him. Then we've got the president getting shot. Don't love to see it. Jim Garrison. We meet Jim Garrison. Played by Kevin Costner. He learns that the president's shot, and he watches it in a local bar with one guy just yelling like, "Fuck yeah, we killed the communist JFK." That guy. So I did a little internet deep dive of IMDb. You guys heard of this? And so the Willie O'Keefe character that Kevin Bacon plays, not a real guy, not real. Totally
figment.
Total fictional. We got to put Jonathan Frakes in from Ripley's Believe It or Not.
It's totally made up. Pure fiction.
Total fabrication.
It's a fact. We made it up. Surprise. Did you believe it? It wasn't.
Have you ever seen a man hit on Jim Garrison and get Mobe? Not true. We made it up.
So, well, he's not a total fabrication, but he's a conglomerate of
composite.
A composite. Yeah, a conglomerate. He's not like a fucking he's corporation.
I often think of Kevin Bacon as Unilever. A corporation.
But the real guy who was basically the guy whose whole case Garrison's case rested on, and he was kind of seen as unreliable. That's him. He's the guy yelling in the bar.
Oh, so they just pulled the real people from these cases.
Yeah, they really did.
Interesting.
Then we get the good old man fight that me and Adam love in these Costner movies. Anytime two old men can fight, I just think it's great. We meet William Bannister, played by Ed Asner, who's just getting drunk and talking about how much he hates Kennedy after Kennedy's been shot in the head.
I was just going to sneak in for a second, and that whole stretch, there's a lot of people sad, but there's only speckles of people who are pleased of the assassination of the president. But mind you, they're in like Louisiana in the 60s, and I was expecting I would know for a fact there would be more people who were pleasantly surprised to see the assassination of a Democratic president.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but maybe they were just a little more cool, like, I might not bring it up right. I might not rejoice right now.
Let me reiterate, Louisiana in the 60s.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Catholic boy had to get it. I don't believe that. I don't mean that.
Playing another character.
Bannister just cold clocks Jack Lemmon playing Jack Martin for insinuating he had seen a little much in the office that
I see some things. What shady characters?
Garrison household, he's watching the Oswald press conference, and then Oswald finds out Oswald's been working that summer and is connected to David Ferry, and then Oswald's shot, as happens on a lot. That is a crazy thing that happened. Can we just talk about that in America for a little bit? That's insane.
That was a thing, that someone could just be like, that a state witness in the assassination of the president could just be murdered on live TV, and people were like, did you see the thing on the news tonight? Yeah.
That's crazy. Dinner? Nuts.
The 60s were insane. Between like JFK and then Oswald getting murdered on live TV, and then Bobby and MLK. It's just Malcolm, like
the Vietnam War,
like
to escalate,
just happening, just people getting picked up and shipped off,
and again talking about TV being like the first war that would be broadcast over dinner on TV in your household.
Yeah, I guess you just rolled with the punches. I mean, I know people didn't just roll with the punches. It was a time of great unrest, and people marching and standing up for their rights, but. How anybody could just be like, come on, man, you're overreacting to like any movement happening in that time. Like, no, this is just how it goes. No,
I mean, if I was an upper middle class white person in Northern California, I'd be like, y'all getting carried away. This seems perfectly fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
You don't want TV dinner.
You don't want the Viet Cong coming over here, do you?
I guess the commies.
Yeah, that brings us to our first scene with our boy Pesci, who's just.
Oof. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, let's talk about Pesci in this movie for a second. Pesci's coming off, his biggest performance to date, his Oscar, right? He is just coming off.
Sorry, wait.
Well, no, Home Alone is this same year, but
is it
but good
actually?
No, Home Alone 2 is the same year.
No, Home Alone's 91. This is 91.
Home Alone's 90.
Home Alone 1 and Home Alone 2 go back-to-back years?
We're gonna Google this. All right. I'm going to show you this Joe Pesci bullet went from Home Alone, turned, made in the air, turned right again, went into Goodfellas, went through the core of that pause, went through, continued along into JFK, then made a deep U-turn back to New York to confront Macaulay Culkin for a second time. That is one magic Pesci.
Well done.
Yeah, Home Alone's 90 and Lost in New York is 92.
So Pesci's coming off his Oscar in Goodfellas, and I do like him in this movie, but it's a wild performance. Like it is. I feel like this first scene is pretty strong.
It is, and it's And it's a wild ride after that. Like, each
Yeah.
time he's back on camera, I feel like Oliver Stone's like, I need you a little bit more coked up now. No, I
Yeah.
need you a little bit crazier each time. And Joe Pesci's threshold
Yeah.
for crazy is like already pretty high. And yet it
Yeah.
keeps getting ratchet up to the point where you're like, this is like, I understand this guy's already a little bit of a nut job, but this is like a little too unbelievable at this point.
I don't ever really, as we discussed in our Robin Hood episode, I don't really care about accent work, like, really much at all. But I know Costner gets a little shade for his accent in this movie, but compared to Pesci's is crazy. But I know, like, Pesci is like a New York Italian. Like, he's not going to do Louisiana that well.
You know what? In the craziness of the character, the accent is like the least crazy thing.
And this is a real guy. Like, it is an absurdity to play this guy, David Ferry.
What did you think when you Googled the real David Ferry? And you're like, I wonder what I'm going to see. And you saw the real photo and you're like, this is just as crazy as the actual character.
Yeah, and you're like, well, what can I do? Can I fault Pesci, or did he just try to meet the moment, you know?
Yeah, like when I look at the actual like mugshot, and I'm like, oh, they toned down the eyebrows.
Yeah, it was crazier.
Yeah, it was even crazier than you think. Yeah, I mean, as you go through this movie and you have his particular movements, because he comes into the movie, and then of course we visit so many other characters and timelines and settings, and as he comes back, I actually think that the arc of his character is justified in how the heat gets like deeper and deeper
turned on him.
And I think that there's something that goes along with, as this monstrosity grows and becomes so multi-tentacled, and just what Jim Garrison is getting into here goes off the rails. I actually think there's something to be said about Joe Pesci's performance and the character David Ferry actually sort of being an avatar for how coked up this whole situation becomes as you go along.
Yeah, totally. Like, what I like about this movie, apart from all, what's real, like, and how cacophonous of a fucking mess it is, it feels like what it feels like to dig into a conspiracy theory. Like, there's so much information, and everything seems crazy, and just like, it purposely shows like, this is hard to parse. It's hard to show what is relevant and why you would dismiss. And you're like, sorry, there's this guy named David Ferry who wanted to be a priest, but then he was arrested for molesting 14-year-olds, but now he's part of Operation Mongoose with the CIA, who's trying to like send paramilitary operations to Cuba. You're just like, okay, sorry, what? Like, why? And I think Pesci, like, I think there'd be better actors to play it, but at least Pesci gives you the, like, this guy's a fucking weirdo that, like, can only exist in this weird world that we call reality, I guess. Mm-hmm. I do love his justifications, like lines about.
Come to think of it, they're right. We got out there where the geese were, and there were thousands of them all over the place. But you couldn't approach them. So why's a bunch of birds?
Why's a bunch of birds, them geese? It's like,
I fucking love this scene.
Why?
Yeah, that's right. I apologize. I forgot about that.
It was only upon approaching the birds that we realized we had forgotten our shotguns.
Let me tell you a quick tidbit. When I say this, I want to give deep love to a place I've never been to, and I don't want to make any snap judgments. But there's only two scenarios in which Galveston, Texas has been on my radar. And it's this movie and The Jinx with Robert Durst.
Right.
Documentary about a serial killer. And so, and listen, that's not the people of Galveston, Texans' fault. But I just remember that coming up here and being like, oh, Galveston, I literally just rewatched The Jinx, and it's coming up in my mind again. But what I actually maybe really want to say here, just to set it out, as we're about to really dig in here, and both of you have kind of showed your hand as both multiple times watchers and people who love this movie, I'm gonna say up front, I think this movie does incredible things, and I don't know about this movie as well. I'm not
big Zag. I love it.
I'm not saying that I am gonna say up front, I'm not saying that this is a bad film or I'm down on this film, but I am saying the way that this film plays right up front, and in fact, especially in the first hour and a half of this, longer than the Return of the King epic of kind of fire hose of information coming at you, and here's these characters, and we're over here, and now we're over here, and here's this person that you just met, we're going to fill you in like 3 seconds. And I think that Oliver Stone is intentionally doing something to orient you and make Jim Garrison your avatar for this movie, of going, imagine just being pounded on every side with it's the CIA, it's the mafia, it's anti-Castro, it's pro-Castro, it's Lyndon B. Johnson, it's everywhere. It's Michael Rooker down the street. Like, we don't know who the fuck it is. As this is going on, I get that. I think that's what he's trying to do, but I don't know how effective it is as a film. I think that there are really innovative and impressive things done with this movie, especially right up front, with the way that he shoots certain scenes, like even the scenes of this happens a little later, but talking about David Ferrie in Cuba, where it almost looks like found footage documentary, and that is interspliced with actual found footage and documentary.
Some stuff looks like Hitchcock, some stuff looks like French New Wave. Like,
And I think especially for the time, that's like incredibly impressive. And to me, it speaks of like Adam McKay in something like The Big Short is standing on the shoulders of this film, using a mix of narrative and found footage and kind of boom, boom, zip, zap all over to the characters. And I think that's really, really impressive. And at the same time, having just rewatched one of my favorite miniseries of all times that really centers on a very similar scenario, premise, and theme, which is HBO's Chernobyl, which is about a real world event involving catastrophic consequences and political conspiracy, and the core theme of what is the cost of truth, what is the cost of lies, which is where this really film drives. I'm gonna kind of look at that and say, I wonder if this film, if it was made today, would really, for me, fly if it was pulled out as a documentary and had the space for 3 to 6 hours. And I wonder about the ability of trying to deliver this. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm aware that as a millennial living in 2022, that the fire hose of information that's happening in a 3.5-hour film, that I'm also coming at it from the attention span of someone living with 3-second reads on social media and 4-minute YouTube videos. And so I have a lot of respect for the 1991 audience that could go in here, sit down for a 3-hour movie where you're gonna be zoomed all over facts that were not really in the popular psyche. We're not really in the public consciousness at this point.
No, not
and
at
come
all.
away going, wow, I really got that.
The FBI lets David Ferrie go. 3 years later, Garrison's flying with a senator, Walter Matthau, and he's basically, I didn't believe any of that Warren Commission bullshit. I will say, Oliver Stone, God love him, he got a lot of really good actors to save a lot of his dialogue that is just, I need you to get some. I need you. Well, not even filler. I need you to get some conspiracy theory talking points. Out
but
of your mouth.
I agree.
Yeah. But it's because there is so much information. I think Walter Matthau does it great. I think Laurie Metcalf later, she just runs through so much information in this. Everything she says is just, and she does it. It's incredible. But so that kind of rekindles Jim Garrison's interest in the case. Because the Warren Commission, if for those viewers at home, was basically this group of that was appointed to kind of oversee after Oswald was killed. Was he the only guy? And they basically went, yep, he's the only guy. Let's not worry about it. No need to continue investigating.
They did a great job.
And then, Garrison starts digging into testimony, just telling his wife about it. Poor Sissy Spacek in this movie. Just thankless job in this movie, eh?
Why? I feel in the Costner movies, every so often, they just give him a nice blonde lady to have as a wife, and they give her no lines. And it's just, you work too hard, and you're spending all our money, and your kids don't like you. And every movie, he's like, Yeah, but the game's a game, baby. Got to do it. And we're just fun with it for 20 years. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not fun.
Yeah, I think like Amy Madigan gets a bit more space as a character in Field of Dreams, but I agree. You look at, especially in this film,
Patricia Clarkson in Untouchables.
Patricia Clarkson in
Oh,
Untouchables.
exactly. I thought it was the same actress for 2 seconds.
No.
Yeah,
It is
feels
not
that way. But based on the way they write her.
If we're talking Costner lineage, the lineage of Costner's career, this is him going to that well that is the Elliot Ness American hero, America's dad. Like, he's playing America's dad.
Absolutely.
And just a heroic, truth seeker who can stand up for what is right. Like, he's just doing Elliot Ness. But one of our main critiques in the Untouchables is just like how fucking boring Elliot Ness is written, and that
dry.
like he does. And Patricia Clarkson is also like, the wife is just blah. I like that they in this there is a little bit more tension. I mean, there's scenes that we've seen a million times. It's just like,
if I have to hear one more come back to bed line from a begrudged wife, like, just come on, guys, get better. Just get better.
Yeah, I think it's important to show this as, because I truly believe this movie is about Oliver Stone showing that when you do open your eyes to this stuff, the toll it plays on a psyche to try to pursue that truth is, it does take commitment, and I think you need to show that sacrifice.
I mean, it's a fair plot point to have. How do we display that you can't unsee what you've seen? Which I think is a great. That's a great thing to explore in a character and in a story. But I feel like it feels, especially in the latter half of this movie, that these were production notes to go. We got to get it back to the personal. We got to get it back to the family. Yeah. And I'm not even saying that those are bad notes, because I think great movies can be grounded in the personal and in the dynamics of family and lovers and friends. But the rest of this movie is just so not concerned with the home life that every now and then we just get like, Dad, are you guys breaking
Well, they use it as a foil, right? They're not really using it as a plot device.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of inherently the issue with how... Well, it limits what your character development can be with the characters that you place in that setting, right? It's always just going to be like, oh, you're not here spending time with people, when it could be actual more generalized, or actually a little bit more textured performances.
For sure. And Costner just waking up in cold sweats. This is, again, like, just waking up in cold sweats to talk about JFK conspiracy theory. It's just so good. Like, there had to be a third shooter. There had to be a second shooter.
It's a little nuts.
And then we get the great Jim Garrison showing his boys Bill and Lou on the tour of the.
Oh, that's my favorite scene.
Great scene. Just being
look right over there.
Yeah, walking with his umbrella, pointing at things.
That is where Harvey Oswald, that's exactly where he was handing out leaflets. Gentlemen, we are standing right in the middle of the military-industrial complex in New Orleans. First of all, it's probably just because federal buildings just own one piece of land. That's just my guess.
No, but the fact that Bannister, his office was there. I'm going to defend all these conspiracy theories.
The Bannister office is the interesting caveat in all of it.
Yeah.
But the Naval Intelligence Office and the FBI and the CIA, I don't know if the CIA has an office in New Orleans. I will have to double check. Then again, an episode of NCIS New Orleans will tell me that they do indeed have an office.
and you can double check all you want, but like, that's just because they don't want you to know about it.
They don't want you to know.
You think that post office is really a post office? I know from the Untouchables that often the post office is not the post office. It sometimes runs booze.
Sometimes.
Great scene. Just like, I mean, there's just so many scenes that are just pure information that are just crazy conspiracy theories.
I always found
love it.
I typically hate exposition.
Yeah.
And this movie is just exposition repackaged in 17 different types of speeches. It's just exposition.
For 3 hours.
Exposition in the courtroom, exposition around a dinner table, exposition as you walk down the street.
There is one character where they just go to Washington just for this one man's exposition.
For 16 minutes.
Debatably the best part of the film.
Oh, for sure.
But I think to Oliver Stone's, to his credit, not only is the casting brilliant, and I think that's how you can repackage great exposition, but it's done so, not necessarily creatively, but when you are investigating, you're taking people's information and their testimony and their statements, and that's basically just exposition of what they thought happened. And from their stories and their perspectives, that's how you build your case. And now that I think about it, I'm like, oh, I get it. It's actually a kind of a clever way of adding people's perspectives to build the story.
As an actor here in Toronto, and maybe others will relate, there's a little show called Motives and Murders that I think probably everybody gets their first acting gig on, which is just like a murder reenactment show. This entire movie is just murder reenactment stuff. Mm-hmm. Like all of it is just crime scene reenactment footage. And yet it fucking rips. and yet it's so good.
So good.
You put that exposition on top of murder reenactment footage, and you're like, yeah, that's a movie.
Yeah, I'm in.
Okay, so we're moving into a Garrison who goes to interview Jack Martin about Bannister beating him after the Kennedy assassination. So we're talking with Jack Lemmon at the racetrack here, and really kind of putting the squeeze on him, leaning on him to really.
I see what you did there. Really squeeze on Lemon. That's very funny.
Thank you, someone. Thank you, Gabe, for being here. All these jokes falling flat. So he talks about how, and they talk about how Guy Bannister died suddenly just before the Warren report came out of a quote-unquote heart attack.
And Asner from a heart attack? Never.
Yeah, no way. So they talk about how David Ferry that summer and all these Cubans were in and out of the office for Operation Mongoose, and reveals to them that Oswald was there from time to time, and in fact was quite close with Bannister. And as Bannister describes in one scene, like when a secretary walks in and says, "Can you believe he's handing out pro-Castro stuff?" and Bannister kind of laughs and says, "You don't have to worry about that. He's one of our guys." And there's a great, I don't think this is a slight on Lemon's performance, but as that happens, the way it's being told is Jack being there and being like, that's kind of interesting. Who knows what that means? Almost just like Homer Simpson trying to take in information and just not getting that there's something deeply conspiratorial about this.
Yeah. He's one of our guys.
I didn't think much of it at the time. Like,
we have guys?
Yeah, we've got guys? Am I one of the guys? Should I know about the guys?
Am I the guy? Do we know other guys know about other guys?
Hope I don't get pistol whipped later for talking about this. And so he says Oswald that was there from time to time, and there was this rich kind of high society guy that was distinct from a lot of the other people that came in that was named Clay Bertrand that was also there. And this is our first really good look at Tommy Lee Jones coming in looking like Cody Rhodes in 2020 with the beautiful
the American Nightmare. The American Nightmare.
I was so worried Gabe wouldn't get that reference when I played.
No, that's great.
With the nice shaka blonde hair and just missing the tattoo on his neck. But this is not a wrestling podcast. That's for our free time. So we get the first shot of this Clay Bertrand walking into the office, played by Tommy Lee Jones. Garrison then goes to meet Dean Andrews, John Candy. When all of a sudden and I'll be honest at this point, because I was sitting down and watching this, and this is the point where I'm like, man, my head is like spinning, and I didn't want to pause this movie because I knew, I was like, if I break from this movie and come back, it's going to be so hard to like re-ingratiate myself with where I am. But I will admit and confess with contrition to the Talking Costner listeners that at this point I had to pull out my phone and just at least do a quick scroll, which is the worst idea to do in this movie, because if you're not paying attention to every line, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, who what's going on?
You got to go back.
So I was about to just be like, my brain just needs like a minute as I just keep watching this. And then all of a sudden I look up, I'm like, hold on. And I threw my phone away. I was like, John Candy is in this movie. Daddy-o.
If I answer that question you keep asking, if I give you the name of the big enchilada, you know, then it's Bon Voyage Dino. I mean like permanent. I mean like a bullet in my head, you dig?
They're going to be jumping all over your head, Jack.
So good.
And he's once so again,
have we figured out why Dino spoke like this? Was Dino...
I don't know, like a jazz musician from...
He was a cool guy.
Yeah, he's a hep cat.
Was doing the black accent before Aquafina? What's going on here?
I guess so. Yeah. The big enchilada.
And you know, the great tragedy being, once again, as in 2 years ago, you know, Joe Pesci and John Candy just missing each other, like in Home Alone. You know, missing each other by hours here. You know, the great combo we never got. So he was Dean Andrews is being interviewed because Garrison finds out he was hired by Clay Bertrand to represent Oswald, but he pretends, first of all, to have never met him. But when Garrison keeps pushing and pushing, basically comes as clean as he's going to come clean and says, as you said, you don't realize what's happening here. Like, if I go any further, I'm getting a bullet in my head.
You're a mouse fighting a gorilla. Jack Kennedy's dead. Is that crab meat?
Fighting a gorilla is hilarious.
The government's still alive. Who are you going to line up behind, Daddy-O?
It's so good. Like, he comes in so hot, and then we got a scene right after this where with Kevin Bacon coming in way hotter that you're like, whoa.
I would love to know what the pre-taping pep talk Oliver Stone gives some of these actors, because they come in throwing absolute heat. Like, what's particularly interesting about some of these performances is, like, they don't fit in this movie, but they're all going to like 1,000%. So then it fits naturally because it's so absurd. Like, everybody's going for the peak of absurdity. So it's just an absurd film.
John Candy apparently like, because he's sweating bullets in this scene too, which is just so great.
Have you ever seen a big guy in New Orleans? They look exactly like Dino.
In a suit.
A suit. A 60s suit, so it's all wool.
And apparently he was like nervous as shit because he hadn't done a dramatic performance before, and like having,
I don't know if that was it. Would you consider that a dramatic performance?
It's a performance in a drama. It's a performance in a drama.
There it is.
Sense the fear too of like, okay, Jack Lemmon's in this movie, Kevin Costner's in this movie, Tommy Lee Jones, like all Joe Pesci, all these people are in this movie.
Heavyweights.
But I don't get to work with them to get the vibe. So I guess I gotta just like go and swing it.
Oh yeah, he gets parachuted into this scene, and I don't know for sure if they filmed the scene before the courtroom scene, but either way, he's booming these scenes. He basically just has Kevin to play against, and that's it.
Have you guys seen the trailer, like the trailer they released for this movie?
I have not.
Of the era?
No.
First of all, it's nuts. It's shot like it's like you're gonna have an anxiety attack. Like, it is the same pace. And you know who makes the trailer with the grand, you're doing too much, Jack? It is Dino. Of all of these great actors, John Candy's performance is in there in that trailer, because does create. I would say his anxiety in this movie is the most realistic that I found. I thought it was the most palatable.
This was the first scene in the movie that actually made me like real. Even Jack Lemmon like made me really lean in and like, oh, this guy's onto something. I know what the plot of this case is. Everything before is kind of, you're trying to suss it out, and this is like, oh, okay, follow that thread, Jim Garrison.
And I think for me, that's what when I think about this movie, and again, as a virgin voyage here, and enjoying, truly enjoying everything so far, but also just thinking an economy of storytelling. You know, I look at the scene and going, we could have probably dropped in here around this point in Jim Garrison's investigation and done a little bit of back work to go like, okay, how did we get here? Because what Dino does in the scene is really situates me and sums up the situation that we're in and the stakes that are there, and we can move through this scene into the other investigations and into the other characters, because we're going to go back to essentially every major player after this again. So
I couldn't shake my head more at this, Adam.
I just think with the amount of information that we're already getting in this movie, the fact that I have the luxury of looking up and being like, wow, I still have 2.5 hours in this movie, and we're really just
see, you played yourself. Never do that. Not with this film.
Not with this film.
I didn't need to see Jim Garrison be like, yeah, you know, I tried the trial and it didn't go, and then now it's really picking at me. I could have picked up right from him getting re-obsessed with it and just fill me in on his backstory with the jump cuts that we already have in timeline here.
I can understand if as somebody who was viewing this film for the first time in 2022, you have to view some of these films with a little bit of 1998/88 production value, and sometimes some of these things take like these very long. Again, Kevin Costner, late 80s, early 90s, like he is leading man. You want him on the screen for as much as possible. In fact, he is selling most of the film. So sometimes you're going to get a lot of vamping where he's in a white suit the whole time with a little freaking cane umbrella. Like this bullshit is hilarious. Like he's vamping.
It is hilarious. And like that Oliver Stone just decides to like, you know what? I'm going to make Jim Garrison, who up until this point was kind of considered a kook. You know, I think this trial was considered a kind of sideshow. But I'm going to turn this guy. I'm going to make the counter myth to the Warren Report, and I'm going to make this guy fucking Atticus Finch. And I think I'm going to make a new myth.
I agree.
And I'm going to present this new myth to the American people. And is it real? I don't. There are things that are certainly played with. I think it's got a little bit more basis in fact than its detractors want to say. But you might have all of this information, Adam, as somebody
I agree.
As a 2021 viewer, you might be like, I know this. But for a lot of people in 1991, like this, talking about JFK this way, you were a kook. And this movie made people go, whether or not they believe every little thing. And I don't think the movie is about every little thing being right. I think it's just, hey, let's ask that question. Hey, did you know this? Isn't this suspicious? And I think that's why you need that full lead up.
I think the fact that, like, typically if this film came out and it was all like wild fabrication, it would just be a film about like and based on nothing. But the fact that there's so many interesting kernels of actual truth, give it like this odd amount of gas to the engine of like, oh, maybe all of it is true. If a third of this movie is kind of true, maybe like the whole thing is true. Because, you know, as we have in our society today, you know, message, it doesn't take a little bit of information to go, you know, off the deep end with, you know, whatever you want to believe. So there's that.
Oh yeah. And so I won't dwell on this too much. I'll just say, I totally agree that the privileged point that I'm coming from is I'm coming in from a post JFK as a movie. Absolutely. I think being a determining factor in changing the public consciousness, particularly in America's like
they passed the bill. They passed the bill right after it.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's wild.
And that, friends, is the most absurd thing of this whole film is the fact the American government was like, guys, well, let's change the date. Let's actually make a bill about this, which is nuts.
Yeah. I'll just say that it coming at it and looking at it as a story and as a film, and as someone who, my bias, as I've shown in a lot of this, is I like economy of storytelling, is that because now we have many, many years past this movie and can have literally 3 dudes sitting on a podcast breaking this whole thing down.
Pumpkin cause.
We can parse out all this. We can parse out all this information. But if I was a moviegoer in 1991 going into it, I would have come out with a more powerful like shift in my heart and mind if I had less stuff happening.
Right.
So Garrison then goes to meet with Willie O'Keefe, Kevin Bacon, who's I think having a string of great performances in the early 90s, maybe coming to a grinding halt around the time of Hollow Man. But at this point, going into Willie O'Keefe and then going into A Few Good Men later, just really, really great performances from Kevin Bacon.
And this guy, like, he also just
cranking it. Just whatever came across that plate, he was like, oh, it's going yard.
Swinging for dingers for sure. Like swinging for dingers. Like he's so good in this. I love this scene. The slow unraveling of like, oh, this guy's a fucking fascist. It's like insane.
Oh yeah, the whole system's got to go down.
Yeah.
What, man? I said, oh wow, this is talk about a heel turn. This is great.
I'm already in jail. Why do I have to lie to you?
This is an out of control line.
See, this is about the truth coming out. You a goddamn liberal, Mr. Garrison. You don't know shit cause you never been fucked in the ass. This ain't about justice. You think this is about justice? No, this is about order. Who rules? Cause see, fascism is coming back.
Nobody wants to buy. Nobody wants to buy.
That line is amazing. You don't know shit.
And that's not his final point. He's like, and again, fascism is coming back.
He just throws some gas on the fire and then just takes it for a ride.
That's a brand new definition to fascism is coming back. I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah, him just being like, no, people got to know why he really got killed, not by some Lee Harvey Oswald. Like, it's so good.
Yeah. And I think this is a scene for me, especially in our current modern context, where I just go, wow, like I get this character, like this zealot who is like, no, people got to know what's going on, and communism and fascism is taken over again. And so we don't get a ton of William O'Keefe. We get this scene and then another scene later, and of course then we get flashbacks throughout the way. But I actually do want to give, for real, a lot of props to Kevin Bacon, because in a cast that has all this exposition and has to fill on, this is who I am and this is why I matter and this is how I'm connected to the case in X, Y, Z and ways, I think that the setup of this scene and Kevin's performance, and in this case the writing, not just of the exposition but of the character, I think really, really flies in this movie, and Kevin Bacon does a great job. So Keith talks about how he used to party with Clay Bertrand and Oswald at David Ferry's place. And he goes through the scene where specifically Ferry starts going on a rant, talking about how Kennedy tanked these espionage missions that they had going on in Cuba, and how he wants to kill Kennedy, and how he could get him. And it's all about getting him into it at the triangulation of Crossfire, and that there just needs to be one fall guy, and that they can take him down.
I love the party reenactment scene of just like Pesci just going off and Tommy just being like, we don't really talk about that in front of strangers.
Take it easy now.
These things can be so easily misunderstood by the young.
Yeah, it's so good.
So Susie digs up all these old CIA records and talks about that Oswald defected to Russia and then returned to USA. And how the hell does that happen when you were in the military and were known to share secrets?
Bingo.
That boy might be an asset.
Might be. And that's followed up by Garrison and Lou going to the book depository. And we see Lou kind of demonstrating and practicing how long it would take to fire, to reload the bolt action rifle. They look at the idea of why didn't they shoot from the opposite window, from the straightaway of the road? Why did they shoot where they would have had multiple chances on the straight line? And he turns, and that's where we sort of get the proof, at least the circumstantial evidence of the triangulation that has been set up by Ferry here, where we see from the book depository you get a shot from the grassy knoll, you get a shot from the picket fence.
It was a killing gallery.
It's a heavy-handed writer when two different characters use the exact same phrase that isn't like a common phrase. Like both Joe Pesci and J.O. Saunders be like triangulation. Like, okay, well,
okay,
remember this word.
I've always found that part of when they get to the book depository and they're going over the shooting. I find even in the conspiracy of the JFK assassination, I find that is the most functionally that is very hard to near impossible. And the way they do it, and then especially cutting it with like, now you're in the spot where somebody may have committed a murder, and you're like viewing the trauma of the issue, where they do those quick slice.
I love that they have this shot of Lou, like they give you the point of view as the audience member, as the camera of Lou, not just kind of firing into the streets, but like taking with an empty rifle, taking aim at somebody in a convertible driving down the street and having the crosshairs on that person. And so there's something about just the perfunctory procedural way they're walking through this, and then also realizing like they're in this movie in the space where this absolutely like cataclysmic event in the American psyche took place.
The logistics of having to be like, yes, we would like to shut down Dealey Plaza and the book depository so we can reenact the shooting. Like Dallas, Texas, I'm sure you want to get over this, but we're not gonna let you. We're gonna hash it all back up.
Are we sure it was shot on location?
It was, it was. And that they weren't on the same floor of the book depository,
but they're in the book depository.
And they're one floor up or something. Like it's like just like that thing of like there's a guy in the window with a rifle. That's traumatic. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
That's like if they rebuilt the World Trade Center, and then they were like, we want to make a movie about this. Do you mind if we just fly a plane really close? You know, like
that's fair. No, that's very, very fair. Like, no, actually, no thanks.
yeah, not fucking worth it.
Fooled me once.
Based on the old Willie O'Keefe, they bring in Clay Shaw. This is our first time we really get to see Tommy Lee Jones really act. We get, intercut with him and Willie O'Keefe. What do you guys think of Tommy Lee Jones in this movie?
So I again, upon most recent viewing, I've taken away more things. Again, when you watch something a couple of times, you got to look at it, you got to appreciate it in different ways. Mm-hmm. So Tommy Lee Jones is, he's got a little bit of range on him as an actor. And I find, again, in the absurdity of all of these performances, him playing like in second gear, like just a very understated Southern gentleman. Well, you see, gentlemen, I said, well, this is quite the choice. Well done. Yeah. Love it.
You have to wait for Natural Born Killers for him to get into like fifth gear when you're just like, okay, this is Tommy Lee Jones unleashed. But this, you're like, it's
Two-Face and Batman Forever. I would beg to differ.
Yeah. I mean, they're very similar. I would
agree. Yeah.
What's interesting, like, this isn't his bread and butter at all. Like, this isn't what I think of. I think of Tommy Lee Jones. I think of No Country for Old Men. I think of Fugitive. Like those, just like stoic, kind of men of the earth, solid man.
But still somehow fast talking, but also a little a little funny and witty, but also real
intellectual.
Kind
of,
yeah, but no bullshit. And then this is like pure charisma bullshit, and he's great. And he looks a lot like the Clay Shaw. He does.
Yeah, I looked that up after too. Like, I think they do a really great job.
A really strong job. Yeah.
We haven't really talked about behind the camera much. Obviously, I think the editing is incredible in this movie.
It's the movie, I think.
Yeah, and I think the costume design is. This is a period piece where they have to go into obsessive detail with costume design, with general art direction. And I think they do like a really incredible job of that. I love Tommy Lee Jones' performance here. And I agree in the world of David Ferry, of Joe Pesci, like off the rails here. And I don't even say that as a slight, but the coked up insanity that many people are portraying here. And I think even Michael Rooker gets to a point towards the end.
Yeah, I like Michael Rooker in this movie though. I like Michael Rooker in every movie though. So
we're gonna do Talking Cliffhanger one day.
For sure.
But I really like. I think this scene is the scene for his character in this, of just kind of standing across from this cross-examination, essentially much more of a cross-examination than he actually gets in the courtroom scene later. I think he pulls in a brilliant performance, and I think I love watching him and Costner in that scene interact together.
Yo, big time. I would agree.
Totally. Next we've got so the story gets leaked in the press that they're investigating Clay Shaw and David Ferry. We get our final Joe Pesci scene
what a scene!
It's
the hair up here and the eyebrows askew.
The best part is Joe Pesci sneaks in his trademark slamming a telephone out of anger.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he does.
Do you understand what you're doing to me? I was like, well, leave it to Joe Pesci. You put a telephone receiver in his hand and he will smash it.
So he's getting questioned and he's like clearly manic. He's clearly like upset. He thinks, they're gonna fucking kill me. And then I love when Garrison asked him, like, is this about Kennedy? He's like, oh man, will you shut the fuck up?
And who killed the president?
Oh man, why don't you fucking stop it? Shit! This is too fucking big for you. You know that? This is who did the president? Who killed Kennedy? Fuck, man! It's a mystery. It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma. The fucking shooters don't even know. Don't you get it?
The mystery wrapped in a riddle.
Wrapped in an enigma, which growing up on Simpsons, when they refer to Nelson Muntz in the episode where Lisa dates Nelson, he's a riddle. He's a mystery wrapped. He's a riddle wrapped in an enigma, wrapped in a vest. I love going back now and watching pop culture and going, oh, that's why Simpsons made that reference. And great line.
This is where you question, like, is Pesci really great in this movie? Or not at all good. Like, I don't know. Like, this, depending on what you feel about this scene, like, Hallie was like, man, Pesci fucking rocks. I'm like, yeah, but it's
but
fucking insane.
I'll tell you, he's testing the limits. He's on the line.
And it is kind of Pesci bread and butter in a way.
And here's what saves his performance. His mania is justified in some capacity because the road that we've traveled for this character,
and feels, the way this story has escalated.
And the key point is the two characters that he's with look at him like, man, you gotta calm down. Like somebody who just doesn't understand where somebody's mania is coming from. And they ground it in the sense where you're like, oh, he's deeply afraid and they're just like about the case. And he's getting increasingly upset about how cavalier they are about it. Who cares about the president? Who cares about the president? I'm gonna get killed. And I'm like, this actually grounds his performance, ironically.
Yeah, casually investigating the murder of the president. Like, you know you're gonna get fucking got, right?
Yeah. Dino was telling us 2 acts ago, man. Yeah. So I'm totally fine with Pesci's performance here. You know, it's not him freaking just out about the shine box in Goodfellas, but David Ferry is a different character and it's different circumstances.
And it's also a lot of those other, like, we can say Scorsese performances we've seen, a lot of those times where he's like losing it and going nuts, like his performance isn't heavily edited. And I'm not saying the editors do a bad job in this movie, but this movie is all about like rapid cutting. It is purposely just disjointed to not see the A to B to C, to not connect the dots. So that also might be part of it. But he dies right after, mysteriously. Now there's like question whether he did actually die mysteriously. Apparently he did leave a couple notes, but then it was ruled that he died of natural causes. Left a few suicide notes, bada bing, bada boom. And then we got the scene. Let's just talk about the scene, okay? Garrison's got to fly to Washington to talk to somebody for. They never explains really why he's got to go.
They never explain. So this was so funny. You bring this up. So again, on recent viewing, because in my mind I was like, did Donald Sutherland go to New Orleans to see him? I'm like, no. There's like the Washington Monument, and they're walking by the reflecting pool, and I was like, no, they're like, but why does he go? And they never really. There's no
I gotta go to Washington.
Impetus. Like I gotta go to Washington.
That scene to set this up, that's a 25-second scene, and either like a note being dropped on a desk or one line of dialogue from Lou or Bill.
They don't got time.
They don't got time, and so we've got
You've got a 16-minute monologue coming. You don't got time for a 25-second.
Exactly.
Insert.
You got to be able to cut at least 30 seconds from these back and forths and these exposition flashbacks to be able to give me, as an audience member, take me by the hand and show me why I'm going to this next character who is going to be quite pivotal to actually getting over the hump of this wide-reaching investigation into the courtroom. And this is the scene where X basically, we're led to believe, convinces him, not only do you have to go forward, you have to charge somebody, and so charge Shaw and move forward with it. And so we don't, if that's going to be then the inciting incident to where this final act lands, and when we go into a courtroom drama, when we go to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, A Few Good Men, I need to know how the hell we got there. And I don't need to know who X is, but you got to give me some idea of why in this world where Garrison is getting tips and clues all the time, why he trusts this one enough to actually go and meet him with no evidence of who this guy is.
You know, my suspicion is they wrote this monologue and it was kind of just sitting on the table as like a separate entity of the script. And as they fleshed out the script, they're like, we need to fit this in the script somewhere. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we got an empty space, let's put it here. And never built around it.
Here's what I think happened. That Oliver Stone went, the Jim Garrison trial of Clay Shaw is historic and important, and it broke a lot of stuff open. But on its own, it's actually weak as fucking shit. And I think that's evident that they don't really go into the trial of why Clay Shaw is guilty. So he put in, if I'm going to make this movie about Jim Garrison, I need to have all of this other conspiracy theory information put in, and I need to have a character that says, Just go fucking do it. It doesn't matter. It's good that you're doing it.
Keep digging. Remember, you're the only person to bring a trial in the murder of John Kennedy. That's important. It's historic.
I haven't yet. I don't have much of a case.
Be honest. Your only chance is to come up with a case. Something. Anything. Make arrests. Stir the shitstorm. Hope to reach a point of critical mass that'll start a chain reaction of people coming forward. Then the government will crack.
It's like giving Oliver Stone permission to go make the movie you want to make because the American people need to know, but saying that to Jim Garrison. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're saying Oliver Stone had his own ex, but he worked at the Universal lot, and he's like, you just need to make a movie about this one lawyer.
Yeah, you can't just make I just want to make all the conspiracy theory points of JFK that I'm fascinated with. So I need to put the narrative of Jim Garrison, even though the Jim Garrison case might have its weak points, but fuck it, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to fucking do it. And I think that's exactly what the X scene is. And it's Donald Sutherland just being so, speaking of exposition,
debatably some of the best exposition ever given in a movie. Period.
It's insane.
So I remember in my times of watching this movie, I never realized how long that exposition scene is. In my mind, if you asked me without saying 60 minutes and prior to my last viewing, if you said, how long is that scene? I'd say maybe it's 8 minutes because it moves at a clip and there's so much information.
I would have said it was 5. Yeah.
And it's so captivating that it doesn't feel like it's a whole chunk of this film. It's debatably its own episode of a movie or of this was a series, right?
Maybe why this scene for me, because I agree, I would have said 5-6 minutes. It doesn't drag, is maybe even just the simple backdrop of them visually moving around and going from the monument to walking on the lawn to sitting on a bench versus almost all the other scenes, which are even the ones that I like, all of them, they're sitting around a table or they're sitting in the office or he's in his house, or he's sitting across from Dino at a table, and so we have these static scenes that aren't moving, and you're just verbally deluging me with information, and then sometimes cutting back and forth. And I think also, props to Donald Sutherland's performance, where it isn't just firing stuff at you. He takes his time with things. As a character, even though I know nothing about him, I'm okay, I think I might not identify with this character, but I think I understand where he's coming from, not by his stated position and what he says, but by how he's embodying this character. And so I think the direction in this scene and the performance is why it works so well. So absolutely props to Donald Sutherland in this role.
To echo your point, there's a lot of intonations in his voice and how he delivers lines and how he kind of frames the stories. He sounds like a company man for the military industrial complex. When he was listing off all of the military involvements that the American government has been in since the 30s.
Yeah, we got the Nazis out of Germany. You're wait, what?
I facilitated Nazi officers to come back here just in time. We got the Dalai Lama, Mozambique, Tunisia, whatever.
Nazis, Dalai Lama, no problem.
And then he ends it. We were great. I was like, he doesn't understand that. Which is, I think this is even more interesting about the American Empire is there are people who are part of that complex who saw no problem with the dirt they were doing abroad, but the only issue was, somebody did the dirt on our soil and it was our guy, and that was the problem. But he was doing all the same shit over there, and that's how he explains it. They actually launched all of the mission. This is how I even recognize that this was an issue, is these are all the things we would have done somewhere else, but they were doing it at home. And I was like, there it is, the smoking gun. It was perfect.
After this scene, Garrison goes and he charges Clay Shaw for conspiracy in the murder of Kennedy. This is where Garrison really gets the light shone on him and starts to become maligned in the press as a crackpot. And then we get these scenes at home, really getting grilled by Sissy Spacek, by his wife for both not being at home. We're starting to have this sense that from Garrison's perspective, everybody's against him, and maybe everybody's on the payroll of the conspiracy, and his wife even accuses him. She really was a big fan of Clay Shaw, and an interesting like point. I don't know if this was true in the press at the time, and probably wasn't true in terms of the household, but accuses him of maligning Clay just for being a gay man. And they go through this kind of whole sequence where then they have a big blow up, and she's going to take the kids and leave, and he says fine, and he gets his Atticus Finch moment on the porch swing out front with both of his kids, talking about it's about doing the right thing and being truthful. And his whole thing throughout this movie, which they have done a decent job of setting up, is his driving force, or at least what he purports at home, is that he needs his kids to grow up in a country where justice and truth still matter, and isn't just a sideshow or a tool of a shadowy government.
I think that I think that it's because he's a homosexual line. I think that's mostly just trying to run cover for Oliver Stone to be like, this world is so strange. Not that homosexuality is strange, but that also like the CIA is running guns through this underground gay network is strange. That it's like, I feel like it has to do a lot of heavy lifting with one line to just be like, that's not what we're saying here. That's not what we're saying. We don't want to demonize
it's
it.
Not the
yeah.
That's not the lead that we're trying to say here.
And absolutely. I don't know if that line does enough heavy lifting. To be fair, like they
not
do really. I feel like they do have fun
at their expense,
making up what these gay parties might have been like by painting themselves gold and.
Like, yeah, exactly. And again, we don't want to. Yeah.
That's the splendor of a long dining table.
Yeah, and so
I just want to know if who pitched this to Tommy Lee Jones. I'm sure he wasn't the one. They're like, Bertram is going to be the one who's going to be painted gold. I'm sure somebody was like, somebody's going to be painted gold and somebody's going to be in the outfit. And did he say, you know what? I would like to be painted gold.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So now we're getting into sort of the inner tensions within the within the team, within Garrison's office, and Bill Broussard, Michael Rooker, starts to lose it over Garrison going deep into these conspiracy theories, and both kind of, I think, for his office, in his mind as the character, trying to connect the dots, but to most of his office just going like, this guy is all over the place. And so Rooker thinks they should go after the mob, and Garrison's saying, no, is the mob, could they have moved the police at this time? Could they have covered up an investigation at the Senate? Could they have published the Warren
Commission?
The Warren Commission. Yeah. And so Bill storms off, particularly after he insinuates that LBJ was involved.
Yeah.
So that's when we're getting real deep into this movie now.
I do think that is like when it's like, okay, I'll just show Jim Garrison as a crackpot, and what anybody would be like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? And be like, maybe I should, maybe I went too far. It's like this scene again does a lot of heavy lifting of just being like, okay, maybe all of these theories are crazy, but there's something really at the heart of it.
There's something there.
There's something
just so crazy, and that's why it works. And so then that leads to after Bill storms out, Lou says, I'm not going to work with Bill anymore. And Garrison defends Bill and says, I trust him. I value his opinion and even his dissenting opinion. And Garrison says, I won't have ultimatums put to me. And so at that point, Lou purports to leave.
Which I don't think we need any of that drama, because who fucking cares?
It doesn't, yeah.
Cares?
It really...
I think it would have been different if there was an actual, maybe more of a mutiny, where people act like more than one person left.
Yeah.
Because I think that would paint the picture this is a little too zany for everybody on board, and it would be hard to convince everybody, but it seemed...
but it's like Michael Rooker leaving is enough to make him have a...
That should be the end of this. That should be the end of the scene right there, and then going... Ooh.
The Michael Rooker thing gives him self-doubt that maybe I've gone too far. Maybe I'm having one of my close friends go, dude, you're fucking crazy, and be like, oh shit, I've lost sight of it. And then the Bobby Kennedy assassination kind of reaffirms his purpose, right? That's the whole point. That makes him steadfast.
But this movie's very tricky, because the scene that falls right behind it is him in the airport where Michael Rooker meets him and says, well, you're in danger.
Did you watch the extended? That might be director's cut.
Is that the extended? So there's a scene where is it the airport? He's in an airport.
So after he sees Bobby Kennedy assassinated, he goes on. John Larroquette plays Jerry Johnson, and he goes on this talk show, and basically is sitting there to basically find a public forum to start sharing like exactly the case he's trying to build. And he shows on the talk show photos of the crime scene and John Larroquette playing Jerry Johnson
and the alleged hobos.
And he's like, we can't show those. And then so you see the producer being like, wrap them up. So we're getting the sense that now even in the public that he can't get the word out and everybody's closing in. And so that was his kind of first real public forum of going, I'm going to lay all my card, or at least most of my cards out on the table. And then following that, he's at the airport waiting to fly home from that. And all of a sudden Bill comes back and he says, I want to apologize for the other day. I'm sorry, but I'm here because there's a threat on your life. And so I flew down to come and be with you. And you need a bodyguard tonight. And basically Garrison kind of shrugs him off and says, what have I told you guys about not listening to these? We get 10 threats a day on my life. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of shrugs Bill off and he sends him home, buys him a ticket. And then there's this scene where he's in a stall in a bathroom and starting to get super paranoid of people walking in and someone beside him and hearing clinks and gun drops. And he kind of moves out. And it's an interesting scene because he moves out of the bathroom.
I think that's the director's cut, is it not?
I think it is too,
I tell you, it adds a certain level of texture to the whole thing.
Yeah,
I agree. I love this scene.
It sounds great. I wish it was in the movie I watched.
Well, I'll let Adam finish how it kind of wraps up.
So it's just a scene where he's feeling for the first time what everyone else is telling him, and even what Bill was trying to tell him moments before of the noose is closing in around your neck. You need to be careful everything you're doing now. And as he's going out, he even shoots this look to Bill, who's now he has to wait for his plane, and Bill's kind of sweating and he's looking at him. And Michael Rooker and the editing does this great job in the scene where you actually don't know or at least I didn't as an audience member, is Bill looking all sweaty and is he all stressed because he's part of it, or because he sees what's happening and Jim's telling him not to go anywhere near him. And so it's this, I think it's actually one of the most effective moments of playing with what your assumptions are and being inside Jim's head, and as an audience member going, I literally don't know who to trust. It's not about exposition. It's about being inside the character's headspace and feeling the stakes of the situation that they're in without having to deliver information about why it's important.
Interesting.
Well said.
Yeah,
well put. Well done.
And mirrors like the idea of like that Kennedy had a bunch of tip off about assassination attempts, and there's a Chicago one. There was like so many, and he was like, "No, I'm going to keep going," and people be like, "Jesus fucking Christ." That's cool. I didn't watch the director's cut. After he makes up with his wife because he watched Bobby Kennedy get assassinated.
Yeah.
Which is also like an absurd.
This movie
just wraps that family into a nice little bow. Like
the weirdest impetus for some makeup sex is the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy died.
Because finally his wife also understands, like, you're not crazy. They really killed him too. And you're like, yeah, I'm not crazy. But then we get the trial, and I'm just going to break down everything that happens in the trial because we'll talk about it. But there's a trial scene where basically all their witness testimony gets pretty refuted. They can't bring one of their key witnesses to the thing because the judge says no. There's the magic bullet scene, classic. There's the showing of the Zapruder film.
Back and to the left.
Or back into the left? It's back into the left.
Yeah, it's back to the left.
Yeah, back into the right one makes sense.
Yeah, it is. But I actually had to reenact the JFK move.
Yeah, that's what I did too.
I was like, if I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, back into the left.
If you were hit with a loogie, where would you know?
That is one magic loogie.
And then there's the reenactment of all Oswald's actions on the day of the assassination, and then there's the big closing statement, dying king speech. I mean, the magic bullet scene, I think, is the most.
It's the most important scene. The whole thing is built on that. Yeah. It is, and like every great courtroom drama is built on some version of a good middle or closing argument.
Or like the key cross-examination, like the few good men, but that's still delivered as the monologue of the prosecutor summing it up and going for the kill.
Yeah, what's interesting is, like, in editing, if you watch this, you just think, is this all one big closing argument speech? Or, like, because there is no cross.
There's no cross.
There's no cross-examination. There's no, like, questioning a witness. There's just, like, this.
You never actually hear Bertram's lawyer ever at any time. I should say Shaw.
Yeah,
no, it's mainly going through the exhibits, and I think this is super effective in the fact that we talk about a fire hose, but this is actually more like the fire hydrant just being loosed and water going everywhere.
Yeah.
For most of this film leading up, where we got now, and I think Oliver Stone gets this, we've got to bring it together, and we've got to say, what are we actually trying to say here? And you've got to, just like you would for a jury, you've got to paint the line and the chain of evidence to say, this is why we've come to this conclusion.
And yet, there's about 2 minutes given to be like, Clay, you know this guy Clay Shaw? Is that Clay Bertram? Blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, all right, in order to prove Clay Shaw killed somebody, we just got to prove this other theory that we have to do. And we're going to spend the next
whole other
15 minutes on not Clay Shaw at all, but just like all the things that are bullshit.
Well, it's conspiracy. Well, that the charge is conspiracy to commit murder, right? So in order for you to pin the charge, you have to
prove a whole other thing.
You got to disprove a whole nother murder. You got
yeah, exactly.
I got to get this other guy off in order to even put another case on this guy.
Which is also why I don't blame Jim Garrison for having his thing not go through, because, like, that's some heavy lifting to do.
Yeah, and it's also the reasonable doubt is a little tough when all of the evidence doesn't really exist because they're not giving it to you. You're also saying, like, well, the CIA killed him. It's not like, well, it was the man, the one-armed man. It was the Central Intelligence Agency, and maybe also the mob.
Lyndon Johnson, like everybody, like it's just,
it was all of them.
That's what's crazy, because it fucking was, though. I don't know about Lyndon Johnson. I give Lyndon Johnson a little bit more of a pass than.
But I think David Ferry's last point, not to backtrack here, I think he says it really well. It's it's never, and it's echoed with Donald Sutherland with X's remarks. It's never one person. It's not like one person said the thing. A few people ruminate on it, and then it gets delineated to a couple people, and all of a sudden this ball is rolling and things are happening. And it only happens purely because it's off of the rumor and the idea and the feeling of it to push it forward. But I think, he didn't do a terrible job. You tell me nobody had enough reasonable doubt to be like, I agree. It's trial. Let's keep going.
I just think about, like, proving Clay Shaw,
right,
specifically had a hand in killing the president. I think he might have brought up, a lot of enough evidence to question the Warren Commission, but that Clay Shaw specifically should go to jail for conspiracy to murder, like, that's
it's a tough sell.
Again, and I'm not saying that this movie should have set out to try and prove that, or that was Oliver Stone's intent. But the fact that then it gets structured around the trial of Clay, which of course I know happens because that was the trial that actually took place. But as an audience member, like, I'm not convinced of exactly what you said, Cam, where I'm convinced that it was a conspiracy. And like you look at the magic bullet scene and you go like, wow, you can't refute that. Obviously the official version of events, the story here is not accurate. But then if I was a juror going off that and going, but show me how Clay Shaw is the person to go after here. I think that's where, and I don't know what the solution is here, because again, it's you're taking conspiratorial events and editorial and trying to pull them together, and using the actual events that took place in Jim Garrison's life and the trial. That at the end of the day, had they made some different storytelling choices, I just feel like it would have been more effective to me as an audience member watching a film, rather than walking away going, well, I definitely agree that what happened here is not what they say took place. But I don't feel that much emotional weight from Clay getting off, because I watched that trial and there's so many people involved that I'm like, well, like, you've kind of made the point that it wasn't just Clay, like it was all of these people. And so if Clay gets off, either go after someone else or realize that wasn't the person to go after. I don't know.
I suspect that it was intentional for you not to feel something directly, because the first line that comes in during the credits is, by the way, we find out that that Clay Shaw indeed worked for the CIA. I felt the same way you felt, where I'm like, yeah, he lost, but there's no resounding feeling like I've lost a trial case. But the gotcha at the end, he walks away with his head held high. You're like, we tried our best and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm gonna hunt these guys down for 30 years.
Sure, but the gotcha for me is the line saying that, some of these things actually led to the actual information being confirmed. That's the gotcha. Where they're like, it was and not necessarily an unreliable narrator, but like a flawed hero. Like, he is not good at this, and you're supposed to believe that he's not good at this.
He is good at it. He's just dealing with, like, David Ferry. Like, you are out of your fucking depth.
No, he's actually not. Like, there's no reason for a local district attorney to be taking this case on. Like, it's actually a little harebrained.
There isn't. But exactly. But he is good at it. He's just, this is so much bigger than him. And his wife says it too. What I think is very, very purposely put in, again, I'm giving Oliver Stone a lot of credit because I think Oliver Stone's fucking great in this movie. And what he wants to do, like you say, showing the magic bullet, the audience goes, oh, I never had that information before.
The magic bullet enters the president's back, headed downward at an angle of 17 degrees. It then moves upward in order to leave Kennedy's body from the front of his neck, wound number 2, where it waits 1.6 seconds, presumably in midair, where it turns right, then left, right, then left.
Showing the Zapruder film. Like, in 1991, people had not seen the Zapruder film. And to just show it back to back.
This is the key shot. The president going back and to his left. Shot from the front and right. Totally inconsistent with the shot from the depository. Again. Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Showing JFK's fucking
face gone.
Autopsy photos. Like, that was very purposeful to go,
that was a whole other movie that was inside this, where I was like, holy crap, we're just like in a movie that's doing this, like, kind of almost this golden American, what it could be, and then also just shoving the face of their dead dad into the audience.
Exactly. That has nothing to do with story, and that's why film is not purely a story-driven medium. It is like, this is it. I'm going to show you the image. And I don't think there's any coincidence that as he introduces the Zapruder film is when his little boy walks into the courtroom and he goes, I just introduced the Zapruder film into evidence, and now my son is here, and I'm going to let my son watch this. I'm going to let my son watch the Zapruder film. And right after, as the trial ends, you've got, I don't even know who it was, if it's supposed to be a juror or who's just giving an interview, goes, we believe there was a conspiracy, but we couldn't for sure say Clay Shaw was part of it. That's like the point to go. That is Oliver Stone being like, I don't care if Clay Shaw is part of it. I don't care.
I just wanted an excuse to do all this cool shit about JFK.
Yes.
And this was his only pathway in. I get it, because you know what I think? This movie is really not about the case. Like, it has nothing to do with Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw is just your on-ramp into, like, by the way, I got to show you the Zapruder film. There's no way you can enter it into evidence and whatnot if there's no path forward. That's why the case... I mean, it's
very
brilliant.
cool that somebody did
do
fucking,
this, of course.
That there was a trial for the murder of JFK. That he's the only person that did it. That's kind of
which is wild.
Well, but this is the part of the interesting folklore of this, right? Like, this one guy figures out a way to pin this one little really specific case on a guy that not everybody, but him specifically suspects is in the CIA, to make this big grand conspiracy, only for it to be proven later on. It all seems a little far-fetched, but those are just like actual facts of the case. Like, these actual sequential things really happen. And then adding all of these other, elements to the story, whether they be more true and less true and what have you. Granted, they add to the movie and they make it more, I guess, Hollywood-esque. But fundamentally, as we watch this film is it's again, the vehicle for us to see all of these things and for the argument to be there is purely for Oliver Stone to vamp. That's why the idea that Clay Shaw is going to be the main perpetrator shows up in like the last 45 minutes of this 3.5 hour epic, because it's really actually not about him.
I want to see a tweak to the structure of the end of the movie. You can still have the courtroom drama scene, but the fact that then it culminates in this, and I know it was very in vogue in the 90s to do like the text epilogue at the end, and then this happened, and then this happened, and here's the result of it, and especially based on true stories, like I'm fine with that as a trope. But then I guess if you're doing a movie where like this is not what it's about, like, and I agree, I think the movie is not about Clay Shaw or even the trial of Clay Shaw itself. But then if you're going to structure that as the climax, and he does take, like, of all of the supporting characters who are then involved, he takes center stage. If you're going to tell me this is what the movie is really about, doing the whole final act and the culminating scene and the climax all centered on the trial, to me, I've got some dissonance in storytelling there that I just feel like it needs some tweaks in the overall structure. But I just need a little more than walking away from the trial and going, I have my head held high to give me a sense of what it's still a Kevin Costner.
It is like the end. It's the exact ending of The Untouchables almost.
It is.
It absolutely is.
Except he didn't get his man. He's just like, yep, I'm going to keep doing it. Okay, because I don't think we've talked about Kevin Costner enough in this movie, because I think he's fucking lights out. I like that last 20 minutes.
Lights out?
Like, I think Kevin Costner is lights out in this movie. Yeah, I didn't fucking stutter, Gabe. I said what I fucking said, okay? Honestly, that last 20 minutes of the movie is just Costner absolutely killing it. I don't give a shit. I think he's phenomenal in this movie. I think this is every bit the distillation of what Hollywood wanted to make Kevin Costner, and like, this is him becoming Gregory Peck. I don't think he has a false note in this movie. I think he's fucking awesome. I think that last speech
besides
is incredible.
His accent.
Yeah, his accent. I don't give a shit, like I said. and it ain't no Robin Hood, I'll tell you that for free.
Yeah, that's true. We're setting a bar for ourselves after our last film here.
Yeah, and truthfully, for him to have Robin Hood, where you kind of start to smell the fart a little bit, but you're like, he can get away with it. He's charming as shit. To this, where he doesn't do, and I don't think he does a lot of the Costner tricks that Costner's kind of been known for up till now. He's pretty straight-laced, and I think
didn't see all the Costner tricks? All the smiles and the whipping the glasses and the cleaning it and the the speechifying to his staff.
I'm saying these are new tricks.
This is where he resharpened the blade for the brand new tricks, the brand new decade of tricks.
That's exactly.
All right, then we got it. All right, Gabe, what do you think about Kevin Costner in this movie?
Listen, like I'm a big fan of The Cause. You know, shout out to that guy. He's like a great actor. I think he really, really, really wanted to be the new iteration of Atticus Finch. I think he really, really, really wanted to be. Yeah. Unfortunately, this film is like not saving a hopeless black gentleman from an angry white mob. It is like about a conspiracy theorist. He plays it a little too leading Manny for me. Like, it's a little, he basically gave Elliot Ness an accent. I'm not going to go so far as to say he's watching paint dry in this movie. I think he does enough, but he just, there's no, because I love him so much. And I think he throws a good pitch from time to time. It just feels like he's really resting on the accent work and being smooth as shit in his cool white suits in New Orleans. And it just feels very wooden. Even when he's like explaining, like the one speech that really pisses me off from in his acting is the one where he's pointing out all of the state buildings and we are right in the center of the naval intelligence industry in New Orleans. And the way he's pointing, I'm like, what are you up to, man? We couldn't have done 3 more takes. You couldn't have grounded in something a little bit more serious. It seemed very, I'm a man of New Orleans. I'm remember in Looney Tunes where they do like the Southern Belle, and there'd be like the big strapping guy who's the Southern gentleman.
Like, I see.
Not the rooster, but the guy who's playing. Yeah, but similar. He does strike me as he's doing a little bit of the rooster-esque accent, which is fine. But because this movie is freaking like 152% of like awesome, he's just in it and he's having a good time. So him just keeping it in the lines services a good performance.
I agree wholeheartedly. Not trying to play the fence. I agree wholeheartedly with both. I think that there are play that fence, baby. I think that I'm Bill Broussard. You don't know who I'm going to side with. So I do agree that I think there are moments where he's too obviously reaching and perhaps exceeding his grasp. I would say he does not embody Jimmy Stewart in this performance. But having said that, I do think he grounds this whole thing, which we're going all over, and I do think the deftness with which he plays this, even if it perhaps isn't as dynamic as something like John Dunbar or even Elliot Ness.
It's more dynamic than Elliot Ness. Come on. Elliot Ness is that's paint dry.
I think that he does hold this thing together where we're a train that could go off its rails at any point. And I do think that courtroom scene is fantastic. I agree. I can see some of the tricks, even as much as I take the, your king has died and you must avenge your king, talking about an American president. As much as I think that writing wise, that's not something that I'm getting behind, I think his performance totally delivers.
His performance is incredible in that. It's incredible.
And
the amount of times he has to quote like Shakespeare sincerely that you're like, that is you're doing yeoman-like service on this.
Yeah,
text.
And that's the thing. In that scene, he goes back and forth between, I'm going to make the argument, and then a writer once said, and back and forth. Whereas if I was a jury member in front of this, I would be like, oh man, like you're just like a first-year university student trying to fit a quote in to having your defining argument.
Shoehorn.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, so that's a writing issue, and I think that he actually is able to pull that off in a way that is super, super impressive. And so I don't consider this like him embodying Atticus Finch, but I do think it is an incredible performance.
This movie got some good reviews in its day, some also not good reviews. This is the best review from Roger Ebert at the Chicago Sun-Times. You ever heard of him?
Shout out Raj.
Stone's film is hypnotically watchable. Leaving aside all of its drama and emotion, it is a masterpiece in film assembly. The writing, the editing, the music, the photography are all used here in a film of enormous complexity to weave a persuasive tapestry out of an overwhelming mountain of evidence and testimony. The achievement of the film is not that it answers the mystery of Kennedy assassination, because it does not. Its achievement is that it tries to marshal the anger which ever since 1963 has been gnawing away on some dark shelf of the national psyche.
I think he got it. I think he nailed it. That's a nailed point.
This is not, who cares whether it's real?
This isn't a documentary.
No, this is not a documentary. Don't think it's a documentary. This is tapping into something. I think it's clear that it did. I mean, this grossed $200 million. Clearly, there was some appetite in America to go, wait, what did happen? I always kind of wondered,
And again, I liken it to very similar, like how The Big Short functions, where it might have a lot of like found footage, but the Big Short is not a documentary about what happened in the recession, in the housing crisis. And it doesn't even matter that some of these characters that, they didn't just pick up Jared Vanette's off a document off a coffee table, that you don't care about that. It's about this national event. And in this case, again, a national traumatic event, and going, let's actually process this and let's talk about really what happened here and what we can learn from it. And I think it does, for all my deep criticisms of it as a story, I think it does an absolutely incredible job of doing that. And I don't know another filmmaker, especially in that time, who could have done it the way Oliver Stone does.
Oh, a Scorsese. I would love to see a Scorsese version of JFK.
But that would be so different. Sure. It would be
so
It would
different.
be so
would-
different, and I feel like it would be more accurate to how absurd or how nuts Garrettson would be.
It would be like The Irishman. The Irishman is the same time, that's working in the same.
Yeah.
You know, you've got Jimmy Hoffa wanting to fucking take out Bobby
Yeah,
Kennedy.
accurate. No,
you know,
that's a good point.
it would live in that same world.
And it would be a character driven opera of these events. And again, that might, as with some of the criticism I've shared, that might be more where I would lean to subjectively as an audience member. But I think that in terms of how unique this film is, it does something really singular.
I agree.
And then the worst review we got from Vincent Canby at the New York Times.
Love Canby.
He's got pretty much the polar opposite view. JFK begins with a promise of intrigue and revelation, though it soon becomes clear that Mr. Stone is Fibber McGee, opening the door to an overstuffed closet. I love it. Just like, who's Fibber McGee? He is buried under all the facts, contradictory testimony, hearsay, and conjecture that he could pack into the film. By the time JFK reaches the trial, most uninformed members of the movie audience will be exhausted and bored. The movie, which is simultaneously arrogant and timorous, has been unable to separate the important material from the merely colorful. It's a jumble.
And you know what? He's not like totally wrong.
He's not wrong that it's a jumble, but you're focusing on the wrong thing. That's my opinion.
I agree. He is focusing on the wrong thing. I do agree with that. I think if you came to this movie with an intention of watching something particular, like something that was maybe more closely related to true events, or also depending on when our Canby wrote this, he may have, after people walked away from this movie, a good chunk of younger folk especially, they were like, yo, this is real. Like this provided me information and this might be real. Yeah. In which case people will be pushing back with like, oh, this is all made up. You know, the opposite of one kernel of fact makes everything true.
Yeah, Roger Ebert got pushed back from Walter Cronkite because Walter Cronkite was like, that movie wasn't right. I reported the news back then, and that's not what happened. And he's like, okay, but it's a movie. And you're Walter Cronkite. What are you talking about?
Why are we? But we even had that fairly recently when Zero Dark 30 came out. People said the same thing. When the sniper came, like there's still that element of based on true events and people going back and forth on how they feel about how this being represented.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line because, you know, you go one way and you're like, is this state propaganda? And then you go the other way and you're like, is this just dangerous lunacy? You know, and it's
somewhere in between. Sometimes it's both.
Sometimes it's both.
At least this one is a much more clear and proper critique of the military-industrial complex, where the other films you mentioned like to go, well, maybe it's a good thing.
Maybe we like it a little bit.
Yeah,
well, of course,
it is. Yeah. It is not. Of course you do, and it is not.
I'm still gonna watch Top Gun
for sure. I love propaganda movies. Love them.
No Transformers. What? Of course.
Love them. Who could have Kevin? We've got two big ones, and they're very common. Who could have Kevin at this time? We got Harrison Ford, who was offered the part, and Mel Gibson. I think Kevin Costner is the best one for it. I don't think I'd want to watch either of those two guys play this part.
Harrison Ford is going to give you like a very, like I'm pissed. Like I don't see him conveying the same warmth, or I wouldn't see him. It wouldn't sell the same sadness or disappointment, and I just don't see that coming from Harrison Ford. But he will be I'm gonna tell you how he died, though. Like I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think both of them would have leaned too quickly into the crazy. This is fucking insane. Whereas
Mel Gibson in particular would have leaned into that.
Yeah. Whereas Kevin Costner was the guy who could be trusted by America. The Field of Dreams guy could be trusted by the American population to get told this story from him at this time.
In this role, if you're going to essentially, as Oliver Stone, sell what would be a crackpot theory, you want Kevin Costner in the chair. You want him as that quarterback for an audience member going, I'm gonna believe it, and I'm gonna trust you.
I trust this guy.
As we said in another one of our Patreon exclusives that is coming out, upon watching the first episode of Yellowstone, I'm like literally confused, being like, why isn't this guy more heroic? Because I'm watching Kevin Costner. Except, so like that's
he's a little shady.
yeah, that's the emotion that you bring as an audience member when you have this guy in front of you. So I do think that that's one of the strongest things about choosing Kevin. And I agree. I couldn't see Harrison Ford and certainly not Mel Gibson in this role.
No,
I could see Harrison Ford. I just wouldn't like the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think Kevin and Harrison are like
polar opposites, but two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, exactly. You can interchange them on any movie, and you're like, yeah, they could have done it, but it would be a different movie. The Kevin in memoriam. There's got to be a scene from this movie that is making his in memoriam. What do you say, Adam?
For me, it has to come down to the magic bullet scene, even more than the speech. Even more than the speech at the end, which I could see, if it was actually in memoriam and they were going, let's venerate, this iconic actor, let's give him the scene that was about the heart of America. But the iconic scene is him with that pointer,
pool cue almost.
Yeah, exactly, that old school pointer thing going through and placing it and the turns. That's
when he spins it on one thumb and then midair. Oh,
how about you, Gabe?
There is no competition. It's back and to the left, and it's a distant second to anything else. Like, I think his speechifying is really, really great in this. I will agree. Like he will pontificate with the best of them, but I don't remember him in this movie as a pontificator. Like, I remember him speaking in other films more. Like, his standout scene that I remember him for in this movie is obviously the courtroom diorama scene. Yeah. And I think that's obvious. And it visually looks great. Like, it visually is interesting, especially with two guys sitting there. It's very fun.
I agree.
Again, one of his tricks is very gracefully gliding around while he's walking. I'm like, it's great stuff. It's great movie magic.
I'm a big fucking softie for some old pontificating. Now I'm going to say, don't forget your dying king. Don't forget your dying king. And the fact that, like, he subtly, I mean, this is more movie making, but he subtly gets to turn and give that down the barrel, which is, I think, incredible. That is direct address, that, like, he breaks the fourth wall with "Don't forget your dying king." Fucking awesome. That's what I think. That's my opinion. All right, the Smithsonian Museum Costner exhibit. What from this movie are you keeping, Gabe?
The glasses.
What's the prop you want?
I mean, the umbrella, obviously, but it's the glasses, because there's a lot of times where like the lighting will glare it, where it just looks like it's a flat color, and then you don't really get to see his eyes. And I think that's a really interesting, affectation to the filmmaking. But it's got to be the glasses. This close second is the umbrella.
Yeah, it's the glasses. I think that's the iconic, like that's the I think the closest that we get to going, like, for me, to the embodying of the Atticus Finch is in that that great glasses acting,
and the hair too.
For the first time in this episode, I'm going to say you guys are focusing too much on Costner, because I'm putting in that Pesci wig, baby. Give me that Pesci wig.
Does the wig include the eybrows?
Yeah, just piece. Like
a mannequin head. Yeah, exactly. And then
a mannequin head with the wig.
It up here, like far down here, and then just
far down, and then the eyebrows on.
That's David Ferry right there.
That's exactly David Ferry. All right, Adam, MVP.
MVP is Kevin Costner. Absolutely. I think there's an incredible supporting cast, and we've talked before. Gary Oldman is one of my favorite actors of all time. And I think
didn't talk about Gary Oldman.
We barely even talked about him. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
He deserves honorable mention, and I think the only reason I don't feel bad not giving to him is because of what you said, Gabe, which is he's almost in a different movie here, and he should have had, and could still to this day maybe have, his own movie. And we didn't even talk about Brian Doyle Murray, great as Jack Ruby as well. But Kevin Costner is the MVP here.
Gabe, who are you saying?
Oh, Oliver Stone. I don't know if you've heard this, but the guy made a movie and then a congressional bill about a president's assassination, about this guy's conspiracy theory about having a traumatic experience going to war. That's pretty crazy. And then even in the bare bones of movie making, the fact that he got that many cameo appearances from that many actors in order to the vehicle
actors
to get
all these different generations.
Like, even someone like Vincent D'Onofrio. Like,
so many.
In 2 seconds of this movie. He's in 2 seconds of this movie. You're like, Why is that Vincent D'Onofrio?
Why is Vincent D'Onofrio? I didn't know Bill Murray's in this picture. It's a brilliant. The only reason we still tolerate Oliver Stone, if we're being honest, is because this freaking bald, and then we're like, all right, Any Given Sunday's still kind of cool. Like, we'll still drink the Kool-Aid on them, and then Natural Born Killers, of course.
I had Oliver Stone, and then I did this last rewatch, and I went, you know what? This entire movie is made in the editing room. It is insane what these editors did. Yeah, they took so much footage, and made it into this movie because it's just exposition, and how much exposition is covered up by, okay, let's just go back to flashback. Let's edit this in.
The unreliable narrator pieces of going back and forth and going. Yeah. We're hearing a character say something, but we're watching something different, and being able to track with that.
Yeah. So John Huston and Pietro Scalia, those were my MVPs. Gabe, could you give me your Costner score?
He gets a solid 8.1. Kevy's out of a possible 10.
Yeah, great. And what about the movie? How do you feel about the movie?
9.8. It's a 9.8 film.
Oh,
this is a 9.8 film. It could be because you have to remember it's a 3.5 hour film that has no business. Like there's a lot of points in the film that they beg you to turn off. Anything to do with those children, and they're like telling you don't want to watch this anymore. Like, I know you don't, but somehow they'll weave in another moment and they turn it around again, and you're like, I'm back in for another hour. And it's,
Daddy, the bad guy's gonna come kill us. No, it's okay. You're fine.
I talked last episode about Robin Hood being a flex for Kevin Costner, being like, yes, I can get away with it. I can get away with this. I'm that big a star. I can just make a big, dumb, stupid fucking Robin Hood movie with a terrible accent. This movie is the biggest Oliver Stone flex of like, I can just give my 3 hours of rambling about and I can also make a very watchable movie out of it, and people will watch 3 hours of this. They'll be riveted.
If you could take the "It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia" meme of Charlie Day at the Pepe Silvio, and turn that into a film and have it work, that's what's going on here. This is the Pepe Silvio
there
film.
It is.
Exactly.
So what are your numbers, Cam?
When we started this podcast, I had in my brain, I'd only seen this movie once, but I had in my brain, I think this is the best Kevin Costner movie. And I was expecting to, because I remembered liking the movie a lot, and I expected to not like Costner, as I'd be like, oh yeah, Kevin Costner's in it. And then rewatching it, I actually had the opposite feeling, because I'm so Costner focused right now, and I've watched every movie he's done, that I'm like, where does he fit?
We're through the looking glass here, Cam.
Yeah, and black is white and white is black here. I was like, I think this is Costner's best work to date. As far as charisma goes, you can make an argument for Bull Durham, certainly. And as far as like directing and stuff, you can make an argument for Dancing with Wolves. But fuck that shit. We're going to get the Postman. I'm going to fucking lose it. I hate that movie. But I think as far as like him as a movie star with presence, I think he's the most solid he is. I gave him a 9 on this. I gave him a 9.
Drinking that Kool-Aid.
Drinking that Kool-Aid, and I think as far as the movie, also giving it a 9. I just went 9s across the board. I like them both equally.
I love that you had the exact energy of Melissa McCarthy and Bridesmaids going, I took 9 of them. I gave it 9. I gave it 9. A lot of energy, a lot of charisma in this film.
That's great.
Give it 9.
Yeah, so obviously, I was a thorn. 4.8. I was a prickly thorn. No, I'm not Vic Michaelis here trying to ruin Field of Dreams here. I'm not here to troll. And despite my criticisms of the movie, I think could have been in there, which is totally subjective. Again, I don't think this is a bad film, and I don't even think it's a weak film. I am going to give it a 7.7 as a film. So I can't. As a film, that's my film score. I can't quite go to 8, but that's like I absolutely think it is a strong movie, and I think as its cultural place, I think if we had a category for for its place in the zeitgeist as a historic like piece of film, I would give it like a 9.8. Like I do think it is the in how it changed perceptions on like, I mean, God, it literally
They wrote a goddamn bill.
They wrote a bill based on this. Like, that's wild.
Wild.
I think it is incredibly important. And for my Costner score, like I said, I had some agreements with both of you, but I still think it turns in a strong performance. I think it lacks some of what I think Kevin has in his arsenal in terms of charisma and an embodiment of a character, but I still think it's strong, and what he's dealing with this massive albatross of a script and how he guides that. I'm going to give him an 8.3. I think he is really, really fantastic in this film.
And finally, power rankings. We got a new top dog here at 8.65, just 0.1 over Dances with Wolves. Dances with Wolves was 8.52. This is 8.65. JFK, we got a new leader in the leaderboard after Robin Hood had such a dismal showing last week.
I feel what a monumental night to be on the podcast to see such
there you go.
To crown a new champion.
Wow.
Yeah, Gabe, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, check out Gabe's podcast, Concessions Stand. Gabe, where can people find you?
At the C Stand on the Instagram. I believe we're at Concessions Stand on Twitter. You think I would know our Twitter handle, but
we'll put the link in. Yeah, you give me the real link, and
links and stuff and whatnot. But yeah, every Monday we release an episode of a couple of comedians talking about all the wacky shit on TV and in movies and all of the news that adjoins them both.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure having you, everybody. Yeah. We just launched our Patreon. We're breaking down Yellowstone now. We're breaking down other Costner-related movies Costner didn't do, movies that he could have done. Check us out on Patreon. Links in bio. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Next month, we got another big episode. Mm-hmm. Kind of the end, I truly think, of the big Costner era.
We'll see.
We'll see. We got The Bodyguard.
Ooh, big one.
Yeah, we'll debate it. We got The Bodyguard coming next.
Boys, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's so
Thanks,
good
Gabe.
to have you.
A pleasure.
Peace, everybody.